Reading and writing are crucial skills that we use all the time. From writing the title that made you click this, to you writing a comment saying how much you appreciate my videos, everything is reading and writing. But they're not innate, and there are good and bad ways to do this. There are rights and there are wrongs. I used to be full of wrongs until I met this model, and this model changed the way I write an essay. And it made me go from like a failing essay writer to like a great essay writer. So let me show you the model that changed how I write, and maybe it'll change how you write too. Hey there. My name is Emiliano, and I started loving writing when I became good at it, which coincidentally was after I discovered the APEC model. So in this video, we're going to go through the APEC model, which was introduced to me by my history teacher during the IB, who has a great educational podcast on Spotify, and I'll leave the link in the description. I'm going to start by why the APEC model is great. Then I'm going to talk about what the APEC model is. I'm going to give some crucial basics that you can't miss. And then I'm gonna go through one paragraph of my TOK essay where I use the APEC model. And that should be all the video. You can find timestamps in the description to skip around, but I do encourage you to watch the whole video because it'll be full of valuable stuff. And without further ado, let's begin. So the APEC model is great for two main reasons. Now I'm gonna go into the more obscure one first, which is that it can help you structure entire essays and not just individual paragraphs. Now, how can a model designed for specific paragraph design help you design an entire essay? Well, you just have to treat the entire essay as if it was one paragraph. It'll still be divided into three main parts: introduction, body, conclusion, but each of the APEC letters and what they stand for will be assigned to different parts of the essay. So for example, the A will be assigned to the introduction, and you will treat the introduction as a way to make a roadmap more or less of where your essay is going to lead, establish a hypothesis or a question that you aim to solve by the end of the video, and more or less tell the reader what you want to accomplish with this essay. Now, the P and the E will both go to the body, which is where you should be making most of your arguments, and you should be stating your proof and explaining and telling the reader why you are right or why this is worth it, and trying to convince the reader as best as you can on your hypothesis. You should be doing this by adding proof and explanations and examples and just everything you can think of to make a compelling case. And then the conclusion, which is attached to the C, is basically where you are going to wrap everything up, sum up the roadmap that you established in the introduction, answer whether or not your hypothesis was correct, incorrect, whether you answered your question, what the answer was, and again, try to reiterate the most important points. So that's the more obscure reason on how you can more or less structure an essay using APEC. Now, for the rest of this video, we're gonna talk about APEC as a paragraph modeling system. So before I go on and on about APEC, you need to know what it means, because APEC is not a word, it is an acronym. And APEC stands for assertion, proof, explanation, conclusion. Let me explain how this works. Let me break down what you're gonna do in each of these stages throughout one single paragraph. During the A, or the assertion part of your paragraph, well, this part is only one sentence long. It's the first or the second most important sentence in your paragraph because it's your thesis for the rest of the paragraph. This is an assertion where you're going to say, not imply, no, you're going to outright say what you want to convey in this paragraph. So for example, the 100 Flowers campaign by Mao Zedong was an attempt to eliminate the opposition. That is the assertion. It's one sentence, it's to the point, it's what you're going to do. And this leads beautifully onto the proof section, which is where you're going to give all your data, your facts, your figures, names, dates, quotes, everything. All of that goes into the proof, where you're going to give it to illustrate your point and to really back it up with historical information when talking about history, or with like quotes from the text if you're talking about English literature, for example, etc. But don't make this like all of what I said. Pick one or two and just go with that, because one paragraph can't be 20 lines long, so be concise, choose carefully. And then we move on to explain, which is basically where you've given all the objective information, you're gonna interpret that, and you're gonna explain why that aids your thesis that you stated in the assertion. So for example, regarding my earlier assertion about Mao Zedong, The evidence could be that, well, that they started rounding up and killing all of the intellectuals that had spoken out against Mao. And then my explanation on that could be that it's obviously a ploy so Mao could make people criticize him and could actually expose them or trick people into exposing himself. And then the conclusion is tricky because you have to do two things at the same time. And these can seem a bit contradictory, but you're gonna have to manage somehow. On one hand, you want to bring the proof and the evidence back to the thesis. So you want to make a one-sentence summary of what you said that relates it to the thesis. So if my assertion was that Mao wanted to trick people into exposing themselves, and my proof is that people expose themselves, and then my explanation is that then he killed them, my conclusion would be that therefore Mao Zedong wanted to remove the intellectuals by tricking them into exposing themselves or something. This is all off the top of my head. But basically, you're gonna rephrase your thesis to make sure that you're getting your point across using the information that you've stated. Plus, you want to link this to the next paragraph. You're gonna use, this is not only a sentence that is recalling or going back into the assertion, it's also going into the next assertion. So there's a more or less clear narrative structure in your essay. So that's why it's a bit contradictory, because it has to reference something before and at the same time foreshadow something afterwards. So that is basically what the APEC model is. Assertion, proof, evidence, conclusion. Quite simple really in practice, and you have to do this for every paragraph that you write. Now let's go over some crucial points that you need to take into account before you start writing in APEC model paragraphs. So there's 3 of them, except that number 2 is divided into 2, so there's like 3.5 of them. Number 1 is that 1 paragraph equals 1 idea. So if you have an hour to write it, you might be able to write 6 paragraphs, but that's only 6 ideas, so choose the best ideas. You can't cram your paragraph full of incoherent ideas because they all have to be related to your assertion, and you can't just assert 3 or 4 things because then you're gonna have to prove 3 or 4 things and then explain 3 or 4 things and then conclude, and it's gonna be a paragraph that's this big when it should be this big. So really, 1 paragraph equals 1 idea, and therefore choose your ideas well so that you can make a compelling essay with not a lot of ideas. The second thing part 1 you should do is that you shouldn't deviate or drift off from the question that you're being asked. So the main essay question, essay prompt, essay topic, don't deviate from that. If you're being asked about the Cuban Missile Crisis, don't go on talking about Kennedy and Khrushchev's relationship, because it makes no sense, and you should really focus on what you're being asked. Focus specifically on the question you're being asked. And then part 2 is that you shouldn't deviate or drift off from your assertion. You have to relate everything in your paragraph has to relate back to the assertion. So if you go off on tangents, you're not going to be able to do that because they're not related. So make sure that every sentence you write or every fact that you're trying to add into this paragraph, you make sure that there is a specific link between it and the assertion. Because if the link isn't there, it needs a new paragraph or it needs to disappear from the essay. Those are your 2 options, because you don't want to have unlinked facts. You need facts and explanations that fit in the paragraph that you're writing so that you can justify them in the explanation and then in the conclusion, so that you can tie it all back to the assertion and you're not just grasping around for the thousands of ideas that you've tried to put into one single paragraph, because that's messy, and it'll be messy for you to write, it'll be messy for the reader to read. So don't do that. And then the third one is that these are all equally necessary and important. You can't prioritize one over the other. So you can't just skip the proof or the conclusive statement or the assertion or the explanation. These are all necessary. So just put in the work, practice, and just be confident making mistakes in the beginning so you don't make them in the end of exams, but you can check out more IB general tips in this video here. Now let's go through one of my paragraphs and really break it down. Right, so let's break down one of the paragraphs for my TOK essay, which got an A, and you can check out more of that up here on TOK in general and on my TOK essay too. Let's break down this paragraph right here, this one, and it ends here. So it is quite a long paragraph, but it's as short as it could be while still making sense and including everything that needed to be included. The assertion is this one. In history, present knowledge is mostly dependent on past knowledge. That is my assertion. It is quick, it is concise, it is to the point, and that's what I'm going to be arguing in this paragraph. Then this is a linking statement from my assertion to my proof, which we'll see right now. The proof starts here with this quote, and then it continues here. And this is long proof. And then we have the explanation, which is quite long again, because I really wanted to get my point across. It starts here and it goes all the way, and then this is another linking statement, and this is my conclusion, and I'm going to continue concluding. Proof, explanation, linking statement, conclusion. And that is what APEC looks like. Small assertion, if necessary, have a linking statement, big proof, big explain. This should be the biggest section of your paragraph. And then another linking statement if necessary, and then conclusion to really wrap up everything you said and relate it back to the assertion at the beginning. And then you move on to the next paragraph. And that is everything that we're going to go through today on the APEC model. I'll see you guys soon. Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing, etc. I really appreciate it. And if this is helpful, please drop me a comment, subscribe, etc. And I'll see you guys soon. Cheers.